Lookups are used in CenterPoint transactions for selecting an item in a list, such as your names or your accounts, or any of the items that you might have in your setup menu. The way that the lookup behaves is are options that are set in your preferences. And we're going to go take a look at those right now. We're going to go up to File, Preferences, General section, and go to Defaults. As in any of the other preferences, you can set them at the application level, and the preferences that you set would be for any database used in CenterPoint, or you can set it at the particular database level or the user level. We're going to leave it at application, and in the middle of the screen are the lookup field settings. So you can have either use autocomplete, and what that means is as you enter characters in the lookup box, CenterPoint's going to attempt to match that to an item in the list. And as you keep entering characters, it'll keep switching to keep matching to another item until you find the one that you want. The use autocomplete can only be matching to one field at a time. So in other words, you could use abbreviation or you could use the name field, but you cannot use both at the same time. The allow to query for items on multiple fields allows you to use as many fields as you want to for it to query in. And the way it works is you type in the characters again, and when you hit the tab key, it will then attempt to match to those characters that you entered. If you are using multiple fields, and let's say you have abbreviation first and then name, it'll first look at the characters that you entered and try to match them in the abbreviation field. If it doesn't find any with that exact match in the abbreviation field, it'll next go to the name field. If the characters that you enter are an exact match, for example, if you had a couple of characters that were the abbreviation for an item, and that were the only characters in there, and it matched what you entered, it'll just display that item, regardless if there are actually other items in the list that begin with those same characters. You also have the option of setting your search contents for either contains or begins with. What that means is when you enter the characters and they allow to query, when you enter the characters, if you have contains, it'll look at the full string to try to find the match, rather than only looking at the beginning of the string and matching to that. If you have begins with, then it'll look at the beginning first, and whatever matches it finds there, it will filter and display in your list. If it doesn't find any, though, in the beginning, then it will go to the full string again and display all of those. So we're going to leave it at contains, and that sets the preferences. The preferences here are the ones that are going to get used for all of your lookup fields in your transaction entry screens. However, in each entry screen, each field can have its own options set to overwrite the default set here in the preferences. So this is just kind of globally setting it for all the fields here, but we can override it later, and we're going to take a look at that next. So we're going to click Save, and now we're going to go to a payment screen, and we're going to attempt to find a name here. So in your, and this is one of your lookup screens that's coming from a list of your names. The icon over here at the right is your lookup icon. So if I didn't want to if I wanted to see the whole list and not try to filter it, I can click this icon, or I can hit my F4 key, and I bring up my entire list. But if I want to try to not go through the whole list and find the one I want, then I can type in some characters here. So if I type in PRO and tab, it found 2 items on the list. And let's see why. So we can, as I mentioned before, we can overwrite this at the field by field level. So I'm going to right click here with my mouse. And I'm going to select options. In my options is how it's set based on the preferences that I've set. So it's looking at abbreviation first, and it's looking at last name. And so when I typed in PRO, it was first looking in the abbreviation field, and it found a list of things that it could match to. Let's take a look. So I'm going to type in PRO again. It found this list, and both of these items had PRO in the abbreviation, so it brought up the two items in the list. Let's take a look and see if we switch the options a little bit. Let's go back, right-click, go back to options. Let's put last name in the menu first. So we're going to move that up, click our Move Up button. Now it's going to look at last name first and then abbreviation. And we're going to click OK. When we type in PRO, now it found three items because there were three names that had PRO in the name. Alpine Professionals didn't have PRO in the abbreviation. Its abbreviation was AP, and it found three. So that's a little bit how it differs depending upon how you've made your preferences there. Now let's make one more change. If I switch, you can also switch in your right-click menu with the begins with and the contains. So if I do begins with instead of contains, and I type in PRO, now it only found one, and that's because in my list of names, I only had one that had the last name that started with PRO. Actually, the abbreviation does too, but I was first looking at last name and it started with PRO. Let's make one more change, and we're going to pick this name right here. We're going to edit this name. I'm going to right-click and go to Edit. I'm going to change his abbreviation to PRO. And let's see what happens now. I didn't change any other preferences. It begins with or contains. It's still looking at last name and abbreviation. If I type in PRO, it brought up Alpine Professional, and that's because that was the only thing that had an exact match to the string that I entered. And so it selected my item in the list. All of the items can have its own preferences, so my accounts could have a different preference. I could have it set up with the use autocomplete if I wanted to. Your lookup list can also be modified of what you see in this list and how it's ordered. If you were to just be looking at your list and wanted to have these in a different order, any column in the list can order it by clicking the top of that column. So if I were to click account number right now, now this list is ordered by the account number. Some of them don't have a number, but it starts with the 1000 here and goes on. If I switch it to the name field, then it's going to put it in alphabetical order by the name. You can also add different columns in this list if you want another column to use for ordering it. You can right-click, choose Add Remove Columns, and I can add any other column that I'd want to order this list by. If I wanted to add abbreviation, I could do that, and if I had abbreviations there, I could order it by that list. If I wanted to order this list by, let's say I wanted them in account type order, but then I wanted all the categories ordered under that, then you can right-click, go to Sort Columns, and I want it to first be ordered by account type. We'll go over to account type, and then category. We'll put it second. And now when I look at my list, I can see that all of the expenses are there, and in addition, all of the accounts under that particular account type are ordered. So another way to kind of help you in finding items in a list. Any field in your transaction entry screen can be set differently for that particular field. For example, in the account, if I wanted this one to be using autocomplete instead of doing the query, then I can come over here and instead of using the global setting, I can use setting for this control and tell it that I'm going to use autocomplete this time. And now I get to pick which one I want to do the autocomplete on. Let's say that we want to do it by account number. And then if I click OK, it'll set that. If I end up making the setting, then later I don't like it, you can always come back here to Options and click Reset to Defaults. That'll set it back to the default setting. The checkbox for Save as Preference is going to save it to your preferences so that it remembers the setting that I last used for this field. We're going to click OK. And now if we typed in, as I type in this number, I'm not sure what all the account numbers are. Okay, let's try doing 1770. 17, and as I type in the 70, it finds it, and it's also reporting back by that particular item that we're doing the lookup by. So it is computers, and it's a 1770. And that's how that one would kind of work. And all of your preferences will get saved with how you set them specifically for your use.